What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. We're going to talk some franchise tag extensions plus Patrick Mahomes' contract with Joel Corry coming up. This is it will be on YouTube, even though it is an audio-only podcast. You can go to the Pick Six Podcast YouTube page, hit the subscribe button, and you will get wonderful Pick Six Podcast content delivered to your YouTube page. It's just us. None of the other stuff that CBS, you're not going to get hot takes from Pete Prisco about Arizona State or anything like that. You'll just get our content. Reminder: tomorrow is the deadline for teams to sign players on franchise tags to long-term deals. It is at 4 p.m. Eastern, I believe. We're going to preview that today, plus talk Mahomes deal, and then we will have reaction after the deadline from the NFL Super Friends. If you want, you can dive in to the podcast feed as well. We have a mailbag where we covered a bunch of different stuff and an emergency podcast on Monday where we broke down the Redskins announcing that they will change their name. Okay, so 14 players received the franchise tag, and the deadline's 4 p.m. on Wednesday. After that, they can't sign until after the year ends. So who better to talk about it than Joel Corry, agent to the Stars. Former agent to the Stars, I guess, is the technical phrase. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
I'm great. How are you? You are crushing it as always with your
hot in Vegas. It was 113 yesterday.
What?
So I was not outside.
Would you rather be in Vegas in 113 degree heat or deep eastern North Carolina in 95 degree heat?
But when I went back home to a couple of summers ago, it was like 95 and 90% humidity. Mm-hmm. But that felt more comfortable than Vegas, even though you take a shower and it's like you take a shower and you go outside. But just, I'd rather have that. I grew up in it. I still can't get used to heat when it gets this hot. When it's over 110, forget it, because it doesn't cool down at night either.
It's pretty hot, man. Yeah, I don't know that I can handle 113. I feel like the problem is, like, if you're sweating at 113 degree heat, nobody blinks an eye because it's 113. If you're sweating in like 90 degree with all that, like, humidity makes me sweat more than the actual heat, I think. But yeah, I'm probably with you. I'd probably take the 95, 90 rather than 113 and just crisp air. All right, Joel. So this is, I mean, correct me if you think differently, but this is the weirdest offseason in NFL history.
Yes, it is. We don't think we've ever seen an offseason like this. Hope we never see one again. We've had labor disputes, which have changed the course of off seasons. Like in 2011, there's a lockout, but nothing where we have a pandemic, which nobody seems to have a handle on. Figuring we were going to buy a bunch of time from when free agency was to the beginning of training camp starting, but the virus seems to be running rampant in a lot of states now. So, yeah, we've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, and as a result, how much do you think these franchise tag situations are affected? Because, I mean, not just from like the actual coronavirus situation where we don't know if there's going to be football, but also, you know, coronavirus in the impact it's going to have on fans being at games and what that's going to do to the salary cap next year. How much do you think that's causing teams to sort of shy away from doing deals with these players who have gotten the franchise tag?
We haven't seen a lot of extensions generally, even though we had one last Monday, which was a monster deal. But for the most part, there haven't been extensions of guys in contract years. So, yeah, it's having an effect because you don't know where revenues are going to be. Usually you can project the cap up X amount of percent, and teams do things in 3-year snapshots. But this year's totally different. Revenues are going to drop. We just don't know how much, because if there is a full season, it's not going to be played in front of full stadiums, maybe empty stadiums, maybe limited capacity, but revenues will drop. That's something that has to be addressed for 2021. The league has proposed that players put 35% of salaries in escrow is a way to hedge against huge revenue losses. That's going nowhere with the players, non-starter. Players union proposed spreading the losses over the entire length of the new CBA. That makes some sense. I don't know if it's going to be spread all 10 years, but I think that the NFLPA and the NFL will come to some sort of agreement where there's not going to be a precipitous drop in the cap next year, and it may stay for a couple of years and won't take significant increases until we have the new TV deals. That money's infused in gambling revenue, which is an unknown variable, starts factoring into the equation as well.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. And wouldn't that be nice to see the NFL and the NFLPA work together on something to actually help each other out? I'm sure that will go smoothly and there won't be any hiccups in the road between those two parties.
Baseball. We saw how baseball was. That took forever to get them to agree on a limited, shortened season. You're going to see this process play out in public for their agreement on what to do with the decrease. Hopefully, it won't be as ugly as the baseball negotiation.
Both sides love to leak stuff to the media and think that fans care about it. They're like, oh, just get in a room and hash it out. Quit trying to win this media game. Just go bang it out and get done with it. I mean, just negotiate.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So the Dak Prescott is the big name that we're all waiting for, and the buzz seems to be that there will not be a deal. At least we're recording this on Monday afternoon. You're listening to it on Tuesday morning. If there's been a deal done on Monday night, obviously that will change. We'll fix it by recording a different podcast. But Joel, I'm curious, how would you handicap this in terms of the two sides getting a deal done by 4:00 on Wednesday afternoon?
Well, I may be in the minority, but I think Jerry Jones will ultimately cave at the 11th hour. In 2015, it looked like Dak Prescott was not going to get a deal done before the franchise deadline. 11th hour gets a deal done. That was surprising. So Jerry's had over a year to get this thing done. They started negotiating last offseason. So I put it all on Dallas for not getting this thing done. They should want to get it done. I know they want 5 years. Dak wants 4. Mahomes deal gives Jerry ammunition to go, see, he signed for 10. Why can't you do 5? But at the same time, the average yearly salary went up almost 30% from Russell Wilson's $35 million per year. So that's going to give Dak's camp ammunition to go, hey, we don't need 45, but we definitely need to be above Russell Wilson, and we want to be closer to Patrick than Russell. So it just makes no sense for Jerry not to get the deal done. I know a lot of people are like, Dak's not a top 5 quarterback. When has that ever really mattered recently in terms of being the highest paid quarterback? He won't be that, but when you've had Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, all take turns as being the highest paid quarterback. If Dak's number 2, he's not going to stay number 2 for long. And over time, the deal's going to look like somewhat of a bargain for the Cowboys. My bigger concern would be eventually you start turning him off, and it goes from I want to be a Cowboy to I want my freedom, and if I re-sign here, great. If not, someone's going to pay me the way I think I should be paid, because after a while, it becomes I'm being disrespected. This is the easy part for him to play on a franchise tag for almost $31.5 million. The hard part was last year. He only made $2 million last year. The risk-reward ratio made it much harder last year. You can bank 31.5 and be fine, and then you're 37.7 next year. And if you get to that point where you don't sign a deal, next year you're starting at 37.7. At least that's where Todd Francis is going to go. It's like, don't talk to me unless that's the starting point, and that's not going to be the ending point, because if he plays out 2 tags, the third one's going to be over $54 million. If they put a third one on him, if not, he's free. So to me, there should be more sense of urgency for Dallas to do a deal than Dak.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the Kirk Cousins thing stands out so much just in terms of how, this guy's drafted by this team later in the draft. It's not a first round pick. He developed some loyalty, even though there's been a coaching change to the franchise that took him because they took a chance on him and eventually gave him the starting reins. And then things got personal between the two sides where they were trying to negotiate a deal. And the team ultimately felt like it had so much leverage that it didn't need to pay the quarterback the requisite amount of money that you need to pay quarterbacks. And as you point out, it's not about, and people need to understand this. And we say this a lot on this podcast. I feel like, I say this a lot on Twitter. I feel like write this a lot whenever I'm writing. It doesn't matter if you're as good as Russell Wilson. You don't need to have Russell Wilson's resume. You don't need to have Russell Wilson's skill set. What you need to have is a contract that comes up after Russell Wilson. That's the only thing that matters. And if you're anything close to a top tier quarterback, all you got to be is like a top half of the league quarterback at worst case, then you are going to find your way into that huge amount of money because no matter how saturated the quarterback market ultimately becomes, no matter how many good quarterbacks there are out there, teams are still going to be needing quarterbacks. Like, I don't know if Bill Belichick would cut Cam Newton and sign Dak Prescott to whatever deal he wanted if the Cowboys rescinded the franchise tag today, but I think he'd definitely be interested. And I think there are a lot of teams out there that would be interested in signing Dak Prescott. And I feel like the Cowboys don't have a firm grasp on that. And instead of, like, there's two paths here. It's either Drew Brees in, was it 2013? Drew Brees in 2013 or Kirk Cousins, later on. I mean, like, which one do you want to be? Because the Redskins did not benefit from losing Kirk Cousins, and the Saints have benefited from locking up Drew Brees. Does that seem like a fair two paths converge situation for the Cowboys?
Yeah, that's exactly fair. And the one thing which is interesting to me is we had more quarterbacks available this year than any other year. Usually the supply-demand argument is that there is a ton of demand, no supply. This year, the market was saturated with quarterbacks. You want an old guy? What old guy do you want? You want a young guy? You could find one because in a normal year, Jameis Winston's a starting quarterback, and he's not this year. So Dallas didn't want to take the risk with the non-exclusive franchise tag where Dak could shop himself. They put the exclusive one on him, so he's locked into just the Cowboys. To me, that shows that they do value him to a certain degree, and to me, that also shows that Jerry knows that he has to get a deal done. To me, there are a lot of factors that are starting to accumulate, which would eventually turn Dak off. And one of them has to go to what happened last summer. You paid everybody but him. Mm-hmm. You paid Jalen Smith when he was going to be a restricted free agent this year, so he didn't have to. You re-up Lyle Collins, so he gets paid twice because he got paid after being in 2 years since he wasn't drafted. You rewarded negative behavior with Ezekiel Elliott because he got in trouble again last offseason. And then you went out and paid him on a holdout. And he only played 3 years, had 2 years left on his rookie contract, and Dak has been basically the model citizen. So that type of stuff will factor in the longer this stuff goes. So if you don't get something done, then I want to see where this thing goes next year if Dak just has an average year. Because they'll have to stick another tag on him because if he is just slightly above average, it's not going to really materially affect his marketplace. Dallas wouldn't let him hit the open market anyway, so they stick a second tag on him. And does he decide, you know what, I can take my $69 million over 2 years, and then we'll see what goes from there. I make another 54, or I'm free.
Yeah.
So I think that's why Jerry needs to get it done, and that's why I think okay.
Yeah, and I really think it's like if you play that first franchise tag, because I don't know that you can do the third franchise tag. You're talking like $50 million, right? Like a quarter of the salary cap, basically. If Dak Prescott plays through all of 2020 and coronavirus on a franchise tag, he's probably not like whatever price you thought you were going to get him for. Do you think it's fair to suggest that the Cowboys think they can get Dak Prescott? They almost feel like they want to sign him to the deal they could have signed him to before 2019 right now. But that's not how this works. You know what I mean? That
was the problem with Cousins. The Redskins were always behind the curve. They lowballed Cousins the first time, and then my understanding is when they finally did make another offer after the first franchise tag, it was something he might have taken a year before, but it was inappropriate after he went out and played on the franchise tag. Because Dallas really should have made him the priority over DeMarcus Lawrence last offseason and tried to get him done before Russell Wilson, because you knew Wilson was going to become the highest paid player and jump Aaron Rodgers. And you should have at least had the thought cross your mind that the Rams and the Eagles might do deals with Jared Goff and Carson Wentz? Because the Rams have done multiple deals of first-round picks after 3 years. They did a running back the year before. Right. The Eagles did Lane Johnson really early, so it wasn't something that was unprecedented for them. So once those deals got done, you weren't getting Dak for what you could have gotten him done before Russell Wilson, which may have been under $30 million per year. And then once he goes out and plays, incurs the risk of injury and poor performance this year, has his best year statistically, even though the Cowboys didn't make the playoffs, you're not getting him for what you could have gotten him then, and you're not getting him next year if he just has a slightly above average year for what you could get him for right now. Because if you wait for a good player, good to great player, it costs you more money in the long run. So if Dallas wants to play that game, yeah, it could cost them their quarterback.
Yeah, they could have locked him up to like a 6-year, $29 million per year deal after 2018. And that's on Jerry. And now you're not going to get it. And you got to pay the price that comes with it. All right. Derrick Henry, any chance he gets a deal? I'm guessing no.
I'm saying no. Tough deal to do. First, I'd have a hard time paying any running back, particularly after we've seen the return on investment for the guys at the top tier. And that top tier, the bottom of it's $13 million with David Johnson. What's he done since he signed? Nothing. Todd Gurley got cut after he signed his deal, played 1 new year on the deal. Actually didn't play any new years on the deal. Made like $20 million more than he would have made had he played out his rookie contract. Ezekiel Elliott has been the best out of those guys because Le'Veon Bell didn't play well last year, first year of his. But Ezekiel Elliott had a down year by his standards compared to what he'd done before. So, one, Derrick Henry is a very physical running back. Running backs have shorter shelf lives than most positions. I would be reluctant, and also the guys who have been getting paid have been dual threat guys, and that's not what Derrick Henry does, is factor into the passing game. If Tennessee gets ahead, you can neutralize Derrick Henry. That being said, he is their most productive, best offensive player. So it would, one level, it makes sense for Tennessee to tie him up and have it coincide with when you can get out of Ryan Tannehill's deal, which is really after the 2022 season, have him coincide when that's really the exit point. But at the same time, I understand why you make him want to play on the franchise tag and do it again. He's already signed it. And then if you had to put a transition tag on the third year, so be it. But yeah, for this team, he's important, but I still don't think it gets done.
Okay. I'm with you. I would be very surprised if that ended up happening. Also from franchise tag land, Chris Jones, probably even the second biggest name in terms of impact here, because to me, what did you think when the Mahomes deal got done? How do you think that affects Chris Jones? Because if I'm Chris Jones, I'm like, I get why you paid him. He's great. He's the best player on our team, the best player in football. But guys, you had time. You didn't have to pay him. You didn't have to give him 10 years, $500 million this offseason. You could have thrown your boy a bone. At the same time, I think it's possible that maybe the Mahomes deal sort of sets the table for a Jones deal ahead of Wednesday.
Yes and no. I could see where Jones could take the position. All right, now you paid somebody else in terms of timing. You didn't have to. I think everything may have gotten on the wrong track when they traded for Frank Clark and gave him almost $21 million per year, a guy who hadn't done anything for the team. Because when I represented players, I used to get phone calls when they took care of an outsider and didn't take care of an insider. It didn't necessarily have to be my guy, but it would be, they don't value who's in this organization. Particularly if it was a player who played the same position as one of my guys, that would really be a conversation where I got an earful and a lot of venting. So that was the first problem. So you're always going to have to pay him in the same neighborhood. And then DeForest Buckner confirmed the neighborhood when he was traded from the 49ers to the Colts. So he's at $21 million per year. The thing is, you can create your own cap room with Chris Jones because he's sitting on his franchise tender. It's been on the cap ever since they tendered him, even though he hasn't signed it. It still counts.
Right.
You could do a deal with a $25 million signing bonus, say 5 years. That gets prorated $5 million per year on the cap. Drop his base salary down to $1 million. You got cap number 6. and you've created $10 million cap room that way. So on one respect, that Mahomes doesn't necessarily impact you from a cap standpoint, but from a cash standpoint, which may be more important, Mahomes' cash flow is not good. He's making 63 over the first 3 years, 20 through 2022. So that's where there could be the impact, because you're not paying Mahomes cash. So
well, hold
where
thought of Mahomes.
Have a real impact.
Let's talk Mahomes they definitely coincide together, but let's talk Mahomes. I want to dive into Mahomes after the break, but it definitely impacts it. So you think unlikely Chris Jones, or you think maybe more likely because they have that wiggle room to work with in the salary cap space?
Well, they have to decide if they want to have two $20 million per year pass rushers, because there are only like 6 of them, and they had 2, and they've had the highest paid guy in the league. Granted, it's cap friendly and cash friendly. The Mahomes deal is backloaded, so you could do it. But that's really, does Kansas City want to commit to 2 guys making that much as pass rushers?
Right.
I'm not sure they do. I've always been skeptical that I always thought that once they signed Frank Clark, that was going to make it tough for Chris Jones to be there long term.
All right. So a couple other names hit. It sounds like Leonard Williams is going to play out this 1-year deal. Look, we don't need to rehash how badly Dave Gettleman botched this. They'll figure it out after 2020 if he's in their long-term plan. So they'll probably give him 120% raise if he's any good this year. And so that was a disaster. AJ Green, there's no chance they're doing a deal with him, right? He's just playing a 1-year deal, and they're going to see how he plays, right?
That makes the most sense. He didn't play last year, and he played half the season in 2018. I would say, here, you're making 18-1, almost 18-2. Please sign it. Come in and help Joe Burrow. He's going to be 32 in July. So, yeah, this screams play on the tag and then reevaluate next year.
Offensive linemen who are on the tag, Brandon Scherf for the Redskins and Joe Thuney for the New England Patriots, both interior guys, which is kind of interesting. Do you think this is any chance either one of them gets a deal done? And were you surprised that either team tagged those guys?
Yeah, I am Thuney more so than Scherf, because first I hadn't been an interior offensive lineman tag since Logan Mankins in 2011, but Thuney was the biggest surprise. Didn't see that one coming. I thought he might become the league's highest paid guard in free agency, because when you've had a good guard in his prime, he's been able to reset the market. Scherf I always thought would get franchised, particularly knowing that Trent Williams didn't want to be there, and ultimately they traded him. So that, to me, puts more pressure on the Redskins to retain, or the Washington franchise, I should say, to retain him long term. Just because you've already lost arguably your best offensive lineman, can you let your second best one walk out the door after this upcoming season? But if you do a long term deal, it's going to have to be over $16 million per year. So you're going to look at the 2 franchise tag average and go, hey, if you want me, it's going to be north of that.
Right, and it almost feels like with Thuney, Bill Belichick might be saying, all right, this is a weird year. Offense is going to be tough to come by. I want to roll the dice that, we're going to put everybody in place for one single year to see if we can work this out. And if it works out great, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're like, all right, we're going to be a running team this year as we try to figure out what we got in Stidham, as we see what Cam can do. And we need those running pieces in place. And so that's why you end up franchise tagging Thuney in theory, I guess, would be why you do that. Anybody else, any other deals that you could see happening with any of these other guys, whether it's Justin Simmons, Anthony Harris?
Yeah, maybe Simmons.
Okay.
Simmons is the one, just because it's got an interesting dynamic that the Broncos hired a new contract negotiator cap guy, Rich Hurtado from CAA, who represents Justin Simmons, CAA. So I'm sure Rich Hurtado had a pretty good idea what Justin Simmons wanted. So I've never seen that dynamic actually happen, where the guy who was part of the agency to the guy who got franchised now works for the other side, is negotiating against his former colleague. So that should be an easier deal to do, because that should cut out some of the posturing, because I don't know how he can go from I was helping you with this deal to now I'm negotiating the other side, and it to be taken as seriously as it would be if you didn't have that dynamic in the equation.
Okay. I'm just trying to look at this list of guys. It just doesn't feel like there's going to be a bunch done. We're so late in to me, Joel, it felt like in the last few years, teams had just, if they wanted to get a deal done, they got it done earlier. They didn't like run up against the July 15th deadline the way that they had in years past. And now I like Matthew Judon and Bud Dupree. It almost feels like those two teams don't like to pay for single year performance. Hunter Henry's been so injured. It's tough to really give him a huge tight end deal. And then Shaq Barrett, same deal with Judon and Dupree. Like, you came out of nowhere, and Yannick Ngakoue, not happy to be there. Can't imagine him getting paid. So, I mean, if I set the over-under at 1.5 contracts done by these teams by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, what would you take, the over or the under there?
I'm going to go under. I think you got a chance to get two guys really done. I'll say Dak and Simmons would be the two most likely candidates to get done. We've seen guys come out of nowhere, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. Muhammad Wilkerson, that seemed like that was dead in the water. And I was like, what? That got done? So you never know. It may get one of those, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Okay. All right. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk about Patrick Mahomes' contract. Okay, so the Mahomes deal got done. 4 million years, $400 trillion. Were you surprised that the Chiefs hammered it out this offseason?
No, I expected it to get hammered out this offseason. I thought if they were going to do a deal, it was going to be before the 5th day of training camp, because that's when his roster bonus was due. The bulk of his money, everything except his league minimum, was in the roster bonus. And if you did it after that date, then you couldn't prorate the roster bonus in the equation. I thought it was going to be like early August at the latest. I just didn't think it was going to be anything remotely like the deal he signed, 10 years. Right. I didn't think that was going to happen, because that seemed more like, did we get in a time machine and we went back to the early 2000s? Because that was when you had deals that were potentially that long. The longest ad on the books was the 8-year extension Tyron Smith did with the Cowboys several years ago, which hasn't aged well. So that's the problem when you sign a long deal like that. It's not going to age well, even though Mahomes increased the market by about 30% over his predecessor, Russell Wilson. So it's going to take some time to leapfrog, and you're not going to see this next man up thing anymore, because usually you're talking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. The most what the increase is, but not having such a dramatic jump. But still wasn't expecting the length of the deal.
Yeah. I would say that, like, here's my thing on it. I don't really understand why Mahomes or the Chiefs felt the need to do 10 years. Like, what was the point? We're in the middle of a pandemic. This guy is,
I get the Chiefs. Cost certainty. You want cost certainty. If you're the Chiefs, you can lock up the best player in football forever. You do it. Now, I don't think this is going to be a model that's replicated by anybody else for a couple of reasons. If you could do your conventional long-term deal, then, yeah, other teams would want to do that. But this is not a conventional long-term deal, because Mahomes has some mechanisms in this deal which makes it hard to get out of it for the Chiefs anytime soon. Even though it's backloaded, I don't like the cash flow. But I'll give you a year an example. Let's take the 2027 contract year. Okay. He's got, in every year, huge roster bonuses, and that year is the biggest year. He's got a $49.4 million roster bonus out of the $59.95 million he's scheduled to make. The thing is, the roster bonus is guaranteed. It's a March roster bonus, so it's third day of the league year. It becomes guaranteed the third day of the 2026 league year. So it's fully guaranteed a year in advance. So in the 2026 roster bonus, which is like 38.9, is fully guaranteed in 2025, a year in advance. And as you keep going on in the roster bonuses vest, or they become fully guaranteed a year early. That's highly unusual. That's the attraction for Mahomes. It's not fully guaranteed at signing, but it's going to be tough for them to get out of a contract at various junctures, because essentially, depending upon when you do it, there's a huge buyout, which is going to be in some years $80 million to buy it out, some years $40 million. So that's a unique feature. Plus, with all that money in roster bonuses, if they need to start kicking the can down the road and creating cap room, they're probably going to come to Mahomes, because after the first 5 years, there's no bonus proration in the deal. So they'll start coming to Mahomes and at some point restructuring for cap room. So if you wanted to get rid of him, regardless of that guarantee, then you got to deal with the bonus proration hitting the cap, and that'll just complicate matters even more. So Mahomes is going to play out the bulk of his contract. I just didn't think it was going to be so long, but who are you going to want to sign to a deal with this type of security? You're not going to do this for Dak. Jerry wouldn't do that. I don't think you do it for John Watson. Lamar Jackson's playing style would scare me. At some point, if he keeps running, he's going to get hit and get hurt. So, no, this deal is not going to become a new trend in the way it's structured for other NFL teams to replicate.
So what's the benefit then for Patrick? I mean, I guess if Mahomes signs it, he knows, like you said, it's hard for the Chiefs to get rid of him. Like they have to do it like 1 or 2 years in advance, depending on when in the contract it is. So I guess that's the benefit.
And they pay a huge penalty to get out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I get that.
That's the attraction to him.
He knows where he is.
And then and he also, I think he's trying to strike a balance between putting the Chiefs in a position to win championships and getting security. So he's leaving money on the table. Okay. It's kind of a way of doing a Tom Brady without it being as blatant as Brady, where some years he was making $9-10 million. The cap number was dropping significantly because of the way he was doing things starting in 2013 and 14. This may be Mahomes' way of trying to do that by leaving money on the table, because he locked in before we know what the TV money is going to be with new TV deals and how gambling is going to impact everything. So to me, you needed an out for him to be able to opt out of this deal at some point in the last 5 years, to me, for it to really make the most sense. I never contemplated this structure. I was thinking more conventionally that you would go no more than 4 years and then reassess things then, where you get an extension after your third new year going into the fourth new year, or you play it out and then get franchised and try to work out a new deal. But never in my wildest dreams did I expect this linked with this structure.
Yeah, I don't think anybody did. So you mentioned Lamar and Deshaun Watson. Now, let me ask you this. We had this debate on the podcast when the deal happened, and John Breach and on HQ. And John Breach was like, this is great for Jerry Jones. Like if Dak would take the deal that Patrick Mahomes got, I'm Jerry, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I was like, what are you talking about? Like I think it's the other way around. I think if it's like, if Dak could get what Mahomes got, wouldn't he take it? Or do you think that's not enough? I mean, I guess not enough.
I still don't think he'd take it. He wants a 4 to go from a 4 to a 10. I don't think he's going to do it, particularly if you have to have the cash flow this way, because the cash flow is hard to compare because it's kind of apples to oranges, because we're talking about a guy who had 2 years left on his rookie contract versus a guy that's starting from 0. But still, if you look at Mahomes' cash flow, it's not good compared to Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, because those guys after their first 3 years are over $80 million. He's at 63.
That's kind of crazy.
How does that happen?
Well, and the other thing too with the Dak comparison is, like, if you're Dak, you're like, look, I'm free after I got 2 years left, like max. Whereas Mahomes,
right, exactly. The franchise tag game, he's like, hey, I can be free, and look what Cousins got on the open market.
Yeah, $84 million.
Who knows what Dak could get on the open market if he chooses to go that route.
Right, and whereas Mahomes still had, he still has his final year of his rookie deal, plus the 5th-year option, plus the 2 franchise tags if he wanted to go that route. And with Mahomes being as good as he is, he would probably get the 3rd franchise tag if he was absolutely dead set on trying to leave. So from that perspective, yeah.
Funny if you say that, because I've run the numbers based on what the 2022 exclusive franchise tag projects to right now. It's subject to change because that number could go up or down depending upon other deals. But right now it would have projected to $39.4 million. So if Mahomes did nothing, played it out, he would have made like $67 million as opposed to the 63 in his contract. Gets a second franchise tag for like 47.3. He's at 114.3 as opposed to 103.5. And then if he got the third one for $68 million, he's at 182.4 versus 141.4 in the actual deal. So that's usually the analysis you look at if you're the agent, but somehow that got lost in the equation.
Okay. How does this affect Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
Deshaun Watson, from what I understand, wants a 3-year extension. So it affects him from this way, that since the deal's backloaded, that it kind of may put a cap on their average, at least for Watson, since he's in his draft class.
Do you think it's possibly like the Calvin Johnson, Adrian Peterson thing where those guys made – like, has Mahomes just created an artificial ceiling for quarterback contracts moving forward?
Yeah, because in 2013, we saw Aaron Rodgers get $22 million per year. That held up for about 3 years. It took until Joe Flacco getting his extension when he had leverage because of cap number to beat that. So since he's jumped the market 30% practically, to like 28.5 to be more accurate, it's not going to be this next man up thing. And even after the first 3 new years, it's not the best in the NFL. Russell Wilson is still the best in the NFL after the first 3 new years at $38 million per year. Mahomes is at 37.95 after the first 3 new years. I don't know how that happened either.
Wait, after the first three new years of the extension, not even counting the next 2 years.
Yeah, if you just take the new money over the first 3 new years, the new money, he was supposed to make like 27 and some change. Yeah, he is at, it averages 37.95, because after the first 3 new years, you're at 113.85. Russell Wilson's first 3 new years. I know who Russell Williams is. Russell Wilson's first 3 new years are $38 million per year.
That's crazy.
That's where I think he can cap Deshaun. He can cap Deshaun because you don't break $40 million per year until year 6. Right.
Okay. All right. So if you're Deshaun Watson, you're thinking, give me a smaller deal. Give me not a smaller deal, but a shorter deal. Like, give me some more cash right now on a shorter deal. And same with Lamar.
I'm playing the franchise. I'm using the franchise tag equation. I'm projecting out the exclusive franchise tag like I did for Mahomes same year, and then the second franchise tag, I'm working off of you tag me twice, we're over 40. So that's how he tries to leapfrog and ignore the Mahomes deal. Plus, he's dealing with GM head coach Bill O'Brien, who's made some what a lot of people would call head decisions. I'm pointing to, hey, I know there's a ton of leverage there, but Laramie Tunsil dramatically changed the tackle market. We went from 18 to 22 on a 3-year extension. So I'm the quarterback. I'm the most important guy. We need to do something along those lines for me. Granted, he's not going to get to 45, but maybe that gets him over. He can get out of that paradigm of Russell Wilson's at 38 first 3 new years and jump Mahomes over the first 3 new years if he goes shorter. If he can get O'Brien to buy off on what you did for Laramie impacts what you do for me.
All right. Awesome stuff, Joel Corry. You're the man. At Corry Joel on Twitter. Isn't that right? That's correct, right?
Yep, that is correct. Corry Joel. I couldn't get Joel Corry because there's a British bodybuilding DJ who has my first name, last name, and I don't have a common first or last name, so I didn't know that it wouldn't be available when I signed up for Twitter years ago.
Well, just jump on Joel Corry on Joel.Corry on TikTok or whatever the kids are doing these days. Thanks.
I'm not on TikTok at all.
Me either, man. Me either. I don't understand it. We'll get Devo to give us a tutorial sometime. Hey, thanks as always. It's always great to talk to you, and we'll chat at you soon, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.